Coming up, we're going to be looking at Cinderella's Revenge with Tom Jolliffe, the film's screenwriter here. It was a movie produced by Mark L. Lester of Commando and Showdown in Little Tokyo fame. Warning, though, when we get into it, especially once we get into the movie itself, there are spoilers, just because one of those things where, I had a chance to see the movie, got to see it in the theater actually here in the Philadelphia area. It's a suburb called Warrington, about, 45 miles away from where I live here in South Philly. But, yeah, I got to see it in the theater, so I had all kinds of questions about things that I saw in the movie that I kind of wanted his knowledge of. Let me know, like, how did that play out, or what were you thinking there, or what was the idea behind that movie, or was my thought of it the same as what everyone was thinking when they were making the scene. I got a little carried away and mentioned a few things that they're not spoilers in the sense of like when we talked about his other movie, When Darkness Falls, where there were a lot of twists that would really sort of change how the movie would go for somebody if you knew those twists were coming in advance and you kind of didn't want to give away things that happen in the movie. This is a little different because you kind of know what the story is, but some of the kind of surprise moments in the movie, some of the reveals, things like that, those are some of the things that I talk about that I think it might kill a little bit of that impact. So just keep that in mind, that when we get in deep on the actual plot of the movie. So essentially, we're going to start the episode. We're actually going to start by talking about Daniel Zirilli, who unfortunately passed last week, and kind of have a conversation in honor of him and his memory and legacy. And then we kind of do some kind of overall conversation about the film. And then I kind of get stuck in and kind of take it, piece by piece in the story and kind of work our way through the film. And so at that point, if you're worried about spoilers, that would be the place to be worried about them. So I didn't give the warnings like I should have in the actual podcast, so I'm giving them now because, again, I just got a little carried away there. But yes, it was a really fun conversation, really fun movie. It's currently playing theatrically in some parts of the United States. So if you get a chance to see it theatrically, it is a lot of fun. I mean, I saw it at a Regal, so it wasn't like some small indie theater that was showing it. It was a Regal theater. I mean, you're essentially seeing that movie. It's in theaters next to other things like Ghostbusters that were playing at the same time. So really cool to be able to catch a movie like that. Lower budget. Something done on more on the cheap there, but having a distributor that can get it a limited theatrical release like that worked really well, and it was fun to see. Yeah, now next week, Todd Liebenau is back on from Forgotten Filmcast. We're going to be looking at Cracker Jack 2. So getting a little Judge Reinhold in there. It's a movie that I've been meaning to do for a long time on the site. It's probably been a bit of a... I don't want to say it's been a miss on my part that I hadn't done it in so long. Everybody else has really covered it at some point. And then, I was giving, usually when I have a guest on a list, the guest comes to me and says, here's my idea for what I want the movie, what I want to talk about in the episode. A lot of times I'll give a few suggestions, say, what do you think of these options here? And in his case, I gave him a few and he was like, an action movie with Judge Reinhold as the lead is intriguing, right? Which is, the whole idea, right, behind wanting to cover that movie. So it's a really fun conversation. That'll be next week. We'll be talking about that. Then in 2 weeks, Ty from Comeuppance is back on. We'll be looking at two Michael Madsen films. So we'll call it Madsen Mayhem. That's the idea there. The movies are going to be Assault on Hill 400, which is an asylum film that also has William Baldwin and a randomly inserted Eric Roberts taking pictures of the battlefield. Just really, really interesting one there. And then another movie is called Machine. Has Neil McDonough in it. It's also Nick Vallelonga, who won an Oscar for The Green Book. Real interesting movie there as well. But that'll be coming in 2 weeks. And then we close out the month of May with Will from Exploding Helicopter, as we'll be looking at Roadhouse, the first Roadhouse, and then the new Roadhouse, the Jake Gyllenhaal Roadhouse. So it was a really fun conversation there to kind of juxtapose those two movies. And then we have recorded already for June, Scott Murphy from All 90s Action All the Time. He came on, we talked about Pistol Whipped, Steven Seagal. So we're continuing his process as his project to go through all Seagal's DTV movies. And so, it was another really fun conversation there as well. And then Ty from Comeuppance, we're looking to get him back on again for his next stint in June. We're going to look at two Dermot Mulroney movies, one of which is Ruthless, which currently on Hulu. Art Camacho has been posting about that one because he was the director of that film. So really cool to be able to talk about an Art Camacho directed movie, but then also, a little Dermot Mulroney, somebody that I think for us growing up in the 80s and 90s, we would not have been thinking we'd have DTV action lead Dermot Mulroney, but we do, and so it's going to be really fascinating to talk about. So that's the podcast there, and then of course, month of May, we've got new DTVC Extra as well. We'll be looking at the John Wick movies, so look for those on the 9th and 23rd. So looking at this week on the 9th, I should have John Wick 1 and 2. I'll be talking about those. I've already watched the first one a second time through, so just gathering my thoughts there for that, but hoping to do the second one tonight. And yeah, hopefully be able to record those and get them up on the 9th there. It's one that I was considering doing when I first started thinking about doing a solo companion to my main podcast. John Wick was an idea I had, and I watched the first 3 kind of in succession like that and thought, okay, I'm going to talk about them on a solo podcast episode. And it just never happened for whatever reason. And then the 4th one came out and never got around to it. So it ended up being Fast and Furious that ended up being the first one. Actually, wasn't just that. Prey was another one I considered from the Predator movies. Was one that I considered doing a solo one on. So kind of came back and did that one recently. So we'll see. But then what we're gonna do after John Wick, I'm not sure. But one idea I had, so I'm kind of curious, from people listening, what your thoughts might be on that. But maybe doing some action-oriented TV shows. Tubi has a lot of, especially the smaller run ones that did like a season or 2. And so one idea is one kind of crazy Grinchy idea I had was The Master, aka Master Ninja, which is on Tubi, all 13 episodes. So that could be maybe an interesting one. Maybe it would be like 4 episodes, I guess, of like 4 podcasts of 3 episodes apiece or something like that. But I don't know. We'll see. But let me know if you got ideas for other solo podcast ideas. Of course, let me know. I'll be happy to kind of include those. Yeah, now with the site, we're kind of getting back into kind of the order that we had. So 3 Kinds of Heat, it's ready to go. So I'm going to be reviewing that one this weekend. Originally was planning to do that last weekend, but then fortunately, Daniel Zirilli passing away, I wanted to do a movie in his honor. So that's why we did Invincible instead. We kind of jumped that one up in the order. But 3 Kinds of Heat will be coming this weekend. And then I have The Weapon next on the list. I think I'm going to stick with The Weapon just because I'm going to be out of town, not this weekend, but the weekend after. So it's probably easier for me to have one like that already ready to go that I can just kind of, maybe even write it before I leave and just post it when during that weekend there or something like that. But, one that I already have the images for, watched it, all that kind of stuff. Was because I was planning to do that one at one point. I can't remember why I didn't do it. I think it was when I got COVID. That might have been what happened there, and missed a week. And so I think I was supposed to use it to kind of fill in a slot. But that's probably what we'll be doing in 2 weeks. Then we'll kind of see what we have for episodes and kind of how we order that going forward after that. And then one other thing is just I've been guesting on some other pods myself. So most recent episode of Comeuppance podcast, I am on with Ty and Brett. We do our 10th version or 10th episode that is the No Subject episode. So to give you an idea of what No Subject is, Ty and I on Instagram, we will sometimes just sort of, chat about ideas, just sort of, we'll kind of just be messaging and sometimes these crazy movie ideas come out. And then what Ty does is he'll kind of, gather those ideas together, and then we'll have an episode where we present the ideas to Brett and see what he thinks of them. So they're always really kind of funny ideas. I mean, some of them are actually legitimately good ideas. I mean, I think the best one I think that actually is like a legitimately good idea for a movie is Food Chain, a Steven Seagal like McDonald's-based action movie that would actually kind of be like some underground like advertising for McDonald's, like an action movie that's an advertisement for McDonald's. I don't know. I just think that might be a really good idea there. But yeah, you could check that episode. That episode is out. It's live. And yeah, hoping to, I think, have Brett along with Ty on again in the near future. Last time Brett was on with Ty was the Unsung Dudikoff episode. So I think we're looking at doing another Unsung Dolph here in the near future. So we'll see what comes of that. Yeah. And then John Cross from After Movie Diner. I have recorded a few times with him for his show. We did a Pam Grier episode. Predator 2 episode, a Wings Hauser episode. So he's in the process of editing those. But keep an eye out there. If you're not already subscribed to After Movie Diner podcast, you definitely should, so you can catch those and see those there. There were a lot of fun, really, really great conversations there. I think in particular the Predator 2 one is a good one because it kind of follows up on some ideas that I didn't express when I did my own Predator 2 one there. So a lot of great stuff there. And kind of fun news was that I actually met John in person recently. So his wife Kim and a friend Nick, they were visiting here in Philadelphia. They had business in Baltimore to attend to. So I got to see them. They spent a night here in Philadelphia. Kim met with some clients of hers, and I went out to dinner with them, so I got to join them for that as well. A lot of fun. And it's one of those things, right, where a lot of us are doing these kinds of things remotely, and in my case, right, everything's remote, right? It's like, for example, like, Ty and Brett, from Comeuppance, they're brothers, so they do at least do their podcast episodes together. But everything I do is remote, and so whenever I get a chance to meet somebody, and this is only the second time, the only other person I met was Brett, so it was a lot of fun. Obviously, I think the big thing is, we all kind of live in the East Coast, the general East Coast area, so. I think it's time, try to get more of those kind of meetups together. But, with life, we're also busy, we're barely able to manage doing our podcasts and all of that stuff, let alone finding time to get out and, travel and do all those kinds of things. But it was a lot of fun. It was really great to meet him in person. And yeah, I think, the podcast episodes that we did them, well before we actually met in person. But yeah, definitely it was great there. So keep an eye out for those. Again, you should be subscribed to After Movie Diner. You should be subscribed to Come Up With Reviews. Also, I was on All 90s Action All the Time. We did Highlander 3. You should that one's available right now, so definitely check that one out. And then I also recorded with Sean Malloy for I Must Break This podcast. I did Altitude. So check that one out. I don't know when he's going to post that one, but keep an eye out for on his podcast feed to see when I'm on for that one as well. So definitely kind of busy in the podcasting world here. All right, so I guess we're time to wrap up here. So, we're already 11 minutes. So this was a longer opening than I've done in a long time. So let's just close it here. We'll have John from After Movie Diner, Miscellaneous Plumbing Fixtures play our theme song here. And when we come back, Tom Jolliffe from Flickering Myth, screenwriter, is going to be on to talk about his most recent film that he wrote, Cinderella's Revenge. All right, we are back, and I'm joined once again by Tom Jolliffe, a screenwriter and also writer for Flickering Myth. Welcome back, Tom.
Hi, Matt. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, no, it's great to have you back on. And in a little bit, we're going to talk about the newest film that you have, Cinderella's Revenge, which is playing in select theaters here in the States, as we speak. Unfortunately, we did have some very sad news that this past week. Producer director Daniel Zirilli passed away, and so yeah, I know you worked with him on Renegade. So yeah, I would get your thoughts there.
Yeah, no, it was very sad news. Daniel was really great to work with. I mean, I worked with him obviously on Renegades, and we developed 2 or 3 other projects as well, which just as the nature of the movie business didn't quite come around. But yeah, he's got such a wealth of experience. He did so many movies that it was impossible not to learn from him. He was very, because he sort of writes a lot of his own movies as well. He was very beneficial in terms of teaching me to sort of improve as a writer. So yeah, I just think working with him really helped me to grow as a writer. Learned a lot from him. So yeah, very sad news, because he's just seemed to be so passionate about movies and so prolific. He was just always working.
Yeah, it's really sad. I mean, obviously the saddest is that he left behind a wife and I think it's 2 kids, I think, right, that he has.
Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause he would post on his Instagram about his family, and so that's obviously the saddest piece there. But I think from our standpoint as movie fans, I mean, from the sort of this ecosystem of lower budget movies, he's, like you said, he was extremely prolific. But one of the things I think in his him being prolific that wasn't the same as like maybe sort of like someone who's more crass or cynical like Randall Emmett. Was like you said, he has a passion for movies, and there wasn't like that assembly line quality to him making so many movies. He just knew how to kind of do it cheaply and on a budget.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, he must have done sort of, 4 or 5 films a year, sometimes as just as a producer to kind of help projects along. But, obviously other times he would be more creatively involved as well. But yeah, I mean, he was one thing from working with him that was always evident was that he really wanted a good picture at the end of it. Um, it's very difficult with working on these budgets, but I think he did some good films, and he did well out of the kind of constraints that he was under as a filmmaker.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think there's a sense that I think because he knows a lot of actors and talent in the business, so it seemed like he would bring a lot of names into his movies, and I think sometimes that's probably where a lot of the budget would go. But then he could, like you said, he could kind of work within those margins there and give you something. It was always something that's much more competent, I think, than again like kind of like sort of the more cynical stuff where it's like, oh, we've just got the faces on the tin, let's just kick this out here. And I think it's always something. I think for me, the way that the direct-to-video film industry has kind of gone in the last, I don't know, 10 to 15 years, where it's become more cynical. Having someone like him make the movies that he was making was, even if the movies didn't work out the way I think he was intending them to, it still was something that was like really, I don't know, it was something that we needed in this lower budget cinema world.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. I think you know, it's one of those things. I mean, he had such a kind of long Rolodex, really, of sort of name actors that he could call upon. A lot of actors that he kind of worked with, numerous times. So it was kind of testament that they were always willing to sort of come back and work with him so often.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think that, just again, like, watching some of his movies, and I didn't realize this. I think when I reviewed Phoenix recently for my site, that he was the only director who I'd seen his last, 6 or 7 pictures. Most directors, there's usually one in their most recent ones that I haven't seen yet. And so it just sort of worked out that I'd seen his last ones, and there is like I think there's certain hallmarks to his films. Like I think he a lot of times he would take like a kind of an established plot device, or like a established story, or maybe even one that had been used in other films, and then he would kind of make his own twist on it. So like Phoenix was kind of like a John Wick but with a female lead, that kind of thing. But I think that it always kind of worked in that sense that like, okay, he had this story that we all kind of knew, he put the twist on it, but then from there anybody can do that part of it. But I think to there without the kind of love that he has for cinema, I think his movies would have just they wouldn't have come across like they did.
Yeah, yeah, most definitely, I agree.
Yeah, so it's someone we're gonna really miss. I mean, I think of some of the other names of kind of bigger names in our lower budget, DTV world. Someone like an Albert Pyun. I mean, Albert Pyun had so many years. I mean, like, considering how young Daniel Zirilli is, um, he and how prolific he was. There's so much more that he was going to give us, for sure. And so that's the saddest thing, I think, is just knowing that, beyond of course leaving his family behind, what we were going to get, the kind of movies that we were going to get from him. And I know he'd been collaborating with Shogun Films, and I think Renegade's probably the one that he did that you wrote. That might be my favorite of his movies that he directed. And so it was exciting just even to think about some of the collaborations that he was going to do with you and Shogun in the future. And so I think for us as fans of the movies, we've got his back catalog to look for. But yeah, it is really sad with what we were going to miss there.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. I think, obviously condolences to his family and all his friends. He's going to be, greatly missed.
Yeah, yeah. So, I think for people out there listening, if you go onto IMDb, you see a good catalog of movies. Probably ones you've probably seen some of them, either ones that he's directed or probably produced. You've probably seen a lot of ones that he's produced and didn't know he produced them. And I think it's definitely going in there. I mean, I would recommend for anybody that wants to see something in his honors, looking to see something. I think Renegades would be the one. I know Ty from Comeuppance Reviews, who I have on the podcast here, he watched that one. And yeah, he really enjoyed it. And it is, I believe, yeah, it's on I think it's on all the major streamers here in the U.S. So, Tubi, Peacock, Plex, they all have it. I would suggest Tubi, Roku channel also, but I would suggest Tubi because it's the one that has like the least intrusive commercials. But yeah, I think you looking to watch a film that he's directed, in tribute to him, I think Renegades is the one to go. Which again, is one that you were the screenwriter on.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, I would recommend that one as well, and probably Hollow Point as well is probably one of my favorites of his.
Yeah, that's one that we talked about on I think no, Crossing Point is the one that we talked about. So I actually haven't seen Hollow Point yet myself, I don't think. Let's see. Oh no, I did see Hollow Point. Yes, that was the one. Yeah, that was the one that Ty and I talked about on a previous podcast episode. Yeah, with Luke Goss and Michael Pare. Really good Michael
Yeah,
Pare in that one.
yeah, yeah. I think Pare he must have done loads with Daniel, so they got on very well.
Yeah, and because
Yeah,
usually when you see Prey, it's kind of more like the turn that he has in Renegades, where he's there for like a 1 or 2 scene cameo. But in Hollow Point, like he has a legit bar fight scene. He takes people out. So yeah, it's kind of more. I think what was the actor Dylan J? Is that his name? The lead actor. Yeah, Dylan J. So it's kind of how it works a lot of times with the Zirilli movies, where you've got one name who's kind of the anchor, who's kind of the main character that isn't the big name, like Dylan J in this case, and then you've got kind of the sort of the satellite, bigger names that kind of rotate around that character. So you've got Luke Goss, Michael Pare, Juju Chen. They all turn in really great performances. Plus the baddie Jay Moore. I was saying I think Ty and I were disappointed that we didn't get more Jay Moore as the baddie, but he is a really good baddie in that film.
yeah, definitely. I think he brought something a bit unique that you don't often see in those kind of films. Just that because he's got that background in comedy, so there was a certain edge to that role I thought worked really well.
Yeah, we were saying how they could have spliced in a few like 2 minute scenes of just him interacting with his henchmen, and it would have probably punched up the film a bit because it was just he was so funny as the baddie. Yeah, well,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
yeah. So
yeah,
definitely very sad news. But I think the one thing we can do with someone like Daniel Zirilli, who has put so much out there, that you could definitely celebrate that catalog. But again, like you said, condolences to his family and to his friends that he's left behind, and someone we're going to really miss. And I think we'll realize it as the years come, as that there's his 1 to 2 movies a year that he would put out. I think that's something that we're gonna miss as the years go on for sure. But we've got all these other ones in the past. Another one too for Dolph fans, Acceleration. It's another one that's available there to check out. So yeah, definitely a sad loss though. So yeah, now I guess we're gonna turn the page here to the film that you worked on with Mark L. Lester of Commando and Showdown in Little Tokyo fame, Cinderella's Revenge, which I was fortunate if I was able to see it in the theater here out in the suburbs, a township called Warrington. So it's about 40 miles from where I live in Southwest. So I was able to get a combination of subway and bus out there. But it was, for me, it's been here in the downtown, that here in the city, proper here in Philadelphia for a while. It was a bit of a shock to the system to be that far out in the suburbs, but it was really cool to be able to see your movie on the big screen like that. So the movie we're going to be talking about is Cinderella's Revenge. It was interesting because I saw your name on the big screen and I was like, oh, I know that name. I know. It's so. And I don't know for you how often you get that chance to see some of your movies on the big screen.
um sadly the UK, it's so difficult with just distribution in general that I don't usually get a chance. I mean, for my next one, Baby in the Basket, we're planning to do a premiere, so hopefully we should get a big screen showing there. But I think sometimes I'd like I'd love to sort of go to see a film, not so much in a premiere kind of setting because everyone's kind of there with the same reason, for the same reasons and kind of packed in. But it'd be nice to kind of see one organically, just out in a theatre somewhere that's kind of on general release. But yeah, we'll see. I might have to travel over to the States to do it, but hopefully one day.
Yeah, I will say, like, so the one thing with the show, I because it's so far away from me, I wasn't able to do a nighttime showing. So I was doing a matinee, which matinees generally don't have a lot of people at them. So I couldn't really, gauge. Like, yeah, that's probably the thing. If you go to one of your showings and you want to kind of get a sense of how the audience feels and all of that, a nighttime probably is a better one because, yeah, that's the only one issue. But for me, with having to take public transportation, I couldn't do a night showing. But it was, I mean, again, the movie, the theater that I saw it at was a Regal Cinema. It's a major chain. Every major movie was showing. At the time that all the current releases that are out. So I can't think of what movies are out right now. But like Dune, I guess would have been one of them. I don't know if Dune is still showing. I'm trying to think of what the big budget Ghostbusters, right? That's one that was there. So,
Ah,
but
yeah,
yeah,
Ghostbusters, yeah.
so I mean, your movie is there in amongst all of these, major productions. And I mean, trailers. There was a trailer for the new Crow. There's another movie that they did a trailer for. It's like one of those things where I get that sense that like Hollywood's out of ideas because I think all of the trailers were either reboots or sequels. So
Yeah.
nothing like major. But then like I could hear the trailer for the new Fall Guy in one of the other ones. So for some reason we didn't get the Fall Guy. I don't know if they thought that there's not a lot of audience overlap between Cinderella's Revenge and the Fall Guy.
Yeah, I mean that would have been nice to see as well. Just, going in and seeing the trailers beforehand.
Yeah, yeah, it was. I mean, again, I think that's the thing. I think it's because when I was telling people that I was doing this, they were thinking, here in Philadelphia, we've got some independent theaters, and that's where I saw, for example, I saw Macbeth, the Coen brothers. I guess it's Joel Coen who did that with Denzel Washington, or like Aki Kaurismäki, I think I'm pronouncing it correctly, the Finnish filmmaker. I didn't get a chance to see his newest movie, but it was playing at an indie theater here, and I think that's what when I was
Yeah.
telling people that this, they were like, "Oh, that's probably where you're going to go see it." And I was like, "No, I was out at in the suburbs at a major theater."
Yeah, I mean it was unexpected for me. I didn't expect them to do a theatrical release, not necessarily that wide. I mean, I thought, perhaps they might do like a 1 day engagement at, 3 or 4 screens, but I mean they had, I'm not sure how many, it was like 50 to 100 screens or something like that, and then a week-long engagement to potentially be extended. So yeah, it was nice to see, and I think it's hopefully it proves to be beneficial and kind of inspire more people making indie films to kind of really push for that.
Yeah, because I think I agree with you there because I think that's something that like like for obviously it's not my movie, right? It's your movie, but even just me going to see it and seeing your name on the big screen was like, wow, okay, it's Tom Jolliffe. We've had conversation. You've been on the podcast multiple times. I know you, and that for me was like that. I was like, oh man, I can only imagine what that would be like for you to to see your name on the big screen like that.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to when that happens. I mean, I've seen, ironically, I've the only ones I've really seen on a big screen of mine are short films that I did kind of way back before I'd even done my first feature, and that's as part of like film festivals and things like that. But yeah, to see like a kind of mainstreamish film um, up on the big screen and see my name there would be, yeah, it would be incredible. But yeah, we'll see one day.
Yeah, and I want to say that theater that I went to, I think when Acceleration came out, speaking of Daniel Zirilli, um, I think when that movie played there, and I missed it, I missed a chance to see it then. I think it was like one of those things where I found out too late or something that it was showing there. It was like one of those things. Sometimes with IMDb, it'll say, "Oh, showtimes," and it'll tell you the theater, and then when you click on it, it's like, "Oh, it's not showing anymore." So I think that's what happened there. So that theater is known for that. So I'll have to keep my eye out because it's possible that other films, either of yours or other lower budget releases might show there for those kind of limited screenings like that.
Yeah, hopefully so. I mean, the way the streaming model works is quite difficult, really, at the moment for filmmakers. And obviously, you don't have physical media so much anymore, which was it was a much easier way to sort of quantify how much a film was making.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can see that there's going to be a few more sort of theatrical releases on kind of independent, I guess, micro budget cinema. Because even if you're not making a massive amount of money during the theatrical run, it gets a little bit more press and a little bit more attention, and then people might keep it in mind for the eventual streaming release, and bring more eyes to it. So hopefully, yeah, more people will do that.
Yeah, 'cause I actually that's a good point, because I read somewhere that I don't know if it was Netflix or just sort of like the streaming, like the different streaming networks in general. They focus grouped movie watchers, and found that movie watchers are more likely to watch a movie on streaming if it was released theatrically. And so that's why it seems like they're pushing for more movies to get theatrical releases, even if it's only for a short period of time, because of that for audiences, they almost like they'll gravitate more to those movies.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it can even be as simple as, seeing in the foyer there's a big poster up somewhere and you think, oh, that looks all right, but I'm probably not going to buy the ticket.
Yeah.
But, if you see that the still image come up on Amazon or wherever when you're sort of flicking through a couple of months later, it might twig a memory and you might be inspired to watch it.
Yeah, and one of the things now with the theater that I don't know if the AMC theater that I go to normally in downtown Philadelphia has this, but at least the one I was out there, the Regal out in Warrington, every theater is dedicated to one movie, and they actually put the poster of the movie next to the door to the theater. So, anybody going to Ghostbusters would walk by and see Cinderella's Revenge, or, again, whatever else was showing at that time. So it definitely gives, for that week or whatever that it's showing, if it ends up being multiple weeks, yeah, the number of people that go see the movie versus how many people are seeing that poster and have that idea in their mind that, like, when they start scrolling the streaming service, that they'll come across and be like, oh, I remember seeing that. I'll have to check that out. So that is hopefully it leads to more movies like this being released in theaters.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. I think, it's a difficult time at the moment for sort of indie filmmakers, particularly at that level, kind of below, I guess, sort of $5 million budgets, where they're trying to figure of ways to kind of keep things manageable and profitable, I guess, so you can keep making movies. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit of an experiment that we've seen in recent times, like Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. They got a little bit of a viral interest and then decided to do theatrical for it, and that paid off. But yeah, I think it's an interesting way to do it, and certainly one thing I've enjoyed seeing with Cinderella's Revenge is that they did a lot of press before the film came out. So Natasha Henstridge was on quite a substantial press run, and she did quite a few, reasonably big shows like the Adam Carolla show and that show which has got Slater from Saved by the Bell, Mario
Oh,
Lopez, yeah, the one he
oh,
does, yeah,
Access Hollywood, is that the one? Or
that's it, yeah, yeah.
yes, yeah, that's well, that's because I mean, Access Hollywood, that is a nationally syndicated TV show. So, yeah, so she would be on, that would be all over the country that they would see that.
Yeah, so I mean, they really did put a lot of promotion behind it, and then obviously you got a theatrical run, so hopefully that it pays off in the end.
Yeah, I hope so as well. And I think, as we get in on the film a little bit. I mean, I think there's a few ideas, I think, with the movie that I think are ideas I think that work really well. I think one that, you take an established, these fairy tales, are so well established in our culture, that everybody, when you say Cinderella story, because in America,
we use the expression Cinderella story for kind of everything. Yeah, I mean, it's like we have our college basketball tournament. They call it March Madness, where 64 teams or however many, they have like a single elimination, to see who's the champion. And a team that's not that good, right, or that comes into the tournament with lower expectations, that makes a run to maybe the last four teams or something like that. That's the expression. It's a Cinderella team. And then of course there's the joke that, or the if the team loses, it means midnight finally came for Cinderella. So it's like such a very it's amazing, and so it's such a an established premise that I think it's a really great place to start from. I don't know, and was that kind of the idea that you kind of okay, we're starting with Cinderella and then we're going to kind of make it sort of more of a horror movie?
Well, I think when I was approached to do it, that was always the idea from the beginning, that they wanted to do a sort of horror version of Cinderella. I think most people kind of associate their idea of Cinderella with Disney, really. So, but going back to the original story, and then there was a variation by the Grimm brothers as well. They were really quite dark and sort of twisted. So it's almost like we're going back to the kind of like the original source materials, rather than kind of doing anything greatly new to the Cinderella story. But yeah, it was always kind of intended to do something in the horror genre, but also not taking it too seriously and having a little bit of tongue in cheek as well.
Yeah, which I think comes through really well. I think that especially the kind of the fun aspects, like because like so the tongue-in-cheek aspects, I think really worked. Another piece that I thought really worked, I remember seeing an interview that Tandy Newton did. I think she was doing, it was like for one of the I think it was the Chronicles of Riddick movie, and she was doing publicity for that, and they were asking her why she took that role, and she was like, well, as a black actress in England, it's hard to get roles because so many of the productions are period pieces, and they don't want people of color in those period pieces. And one of the things I liked about this is it was a period piece, but it did have people of color, and so it was there's sort of that almost like more modern aspect to it that I thought was really good.
Yeah, I think you have to sort of move with the times, really. And I think we were also we have that element of sort of fantasy in the film as well, so you can kind of do what you like, really. You don't have to be sort of hamstrung by any kind of expectations. And obviously, because it's a fantasy story, you can kind of cast how you please, really.
Yeah, which I thought worked really well. I thought that was really good. Now of course, the big name, of course, is the big name from the acting standpoint was Natasha Henstridge, but the big name, of course, for people who listen to the podcast was Mark L. Lester. So yeah, what was it like working with him?
Well, this when I kind of took on the project. I was at the time I was kind of juggling two or three other things, and then I was kind of being offered a couple of things at the same time. One of which was Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, and as soon as I knew that Cinderella's Revenge was being produced by Mark Lester, I mean, there was no competition. So yeah, I took that on because of so I had to get a chance to work with Mark Lester. Obviously, being a massive fan of the most of his kind of films of that era, of like Commando, Class of '82 or '84, should I say, Showdown in Little Tokyo. But yeah, I mean, he's just one of those guys. The experience that he's had in the industry and what he knows, and it's very obvious from the beginning. When you're getting notes or anything from him, or when you're discussing a project, he kind of really knows what he's doing, and he knows how to kind of make a movie sellable to an audience. So yeah, it's just one of those things. It's just another kind of invaluable experience. And of course, I had to name a character Bennett in the film.
Yes.
Whether that went over his head or not, I don't know, but
Yeah.
I'm sure he noticed.
Yeah, because so spoiler for people, because I don't think it's much of a spoiler, because you the way you set up Bennett, right? We know that it's not probably going to end well for him, and I was a little disappointed that when he is dispatched, there wasn't a let off some steam Bennett after he was killed, because I remember in the theater watching, we were like, oh, let off some steam Bennett, but I did catch that you had a Bennett in the film for sure.
Yeah, no, I couldn't help myself with that.
Exactly. Well, yeah, I mean, so as this movie is sort of going along with Natasha Henstridge, was that something where like was she attached early on, or was that something that came later?
She came a little bit later. It was always the thinking always was that the fairy godmother would be played by someone quite well established, and they had a few names kind of floating around. But then, yeah, at the point that they settled on Natasha, I kind of like we did another kind of round of rewrites just to make sure it was kind of well suited to her. And at the same time, we wanted to leave the character as something that would be a little bit different for her and quite, playful. And she's almost got this kind of dark mischievousness about her in it. So, yeah, that was always something we wanted to give her something fun to do.
Yeah, and I mean, it definitely is. It kind of took me back to her days on well, She Spies, I guess would have been the show that she did, where in what was interesting about her character there was that it was almost like she was almost more of like the straight person to the other characters kind of being more goofy, or the kind of other characters around her being more goofy. But that show had a similar tone, maybe not as overt as this movie does, with that kind of more tongue-in-cheek tone, but she seemed to play really well in that space.
Yeah, I mean she's got great comical timing. I mean I guess you could look at her in the whole 9 yards as well. She's kind of been in and around comedy as well as all the kind of the other things like Species that we know her more for. Um, yeah, but I mean, as soon as she was kind of attached to that, because I was such a big fan back in the days of Species, Maximum Risk, and things like that. So yeah, I was really pleased with that particular bit of casting.
Yeah, and she is really great. I mean, it's kind of the perfect role, the way that she plays as the fairy godmother. And then you have Lauren, is it Staerick? Um,
Stark, I think
Stark,
it. Yeah,
Lord Stark as
yeah,
Cinderella, and she played off her well. I mean, most of Natasha Henstridge's scenes are with Lauren Stark. I think she has one scene that also has the footman, at the very end. But for the most part, that's who she's acting opposite. And yeah, I thought it was really great. Their interplay, their chemistry was really good.
yeah, definitely. I think from what I hear from set and everything, Natasha was really great to work with everyone. Really kind of nice and approachable. Um, and yeah, those two got on very well. So there's a definite clear chemistry there from their time working together.
Yeah, yeah, I thought she was really good. I mean, I think for people, thinking of Cinderella, I think, like you said, there's the tongue-in-cheek element, but there's also the darker elements that I think, like you said, harken back to kind of more the original story than like the Disney version. You've got Stephanie Lodge, who plays the stepmother, and she is definitely a darker version of that step. As evil as that stepmother
Yeah,
is in those Disney movies, there's a kind of like a comedic darkness to her, where Stephanie Lodge is bad, even if she's got comedic lines to say, or there's silly things happening, she is just always like evil, and in a very dark way that you don't always see in Cinderella.
yeah. I mean, that was one of the things we kind of went back and forth a little bit on that, in terms of how dark do we make her and the sisters as well. Um, I mean, I've seen kind of, sort of mixed reviews on that front in terms of people kind of liking how dark it went or people wanting it to go darker. Because I think in the last sort of couple of years, horror movies are kind of dialing everything up a lot more now, I think. And audiences seem to be kind of responding to more kind of extreme stuff. So we might have been able to go even kind of darker with it, but yeah, that might have conflicted with the kind of fantasy elements and the comedy side of it.
Yeah, well, yeah. Maybe what I'll do, maybe I'll do a quick synopsis, and then we can kind of, break the film down different parts, and you can kind of give us a sense of like what was happening, kind of, behind the scenes, or if there's anything that that might be, we wouldn't know necessarily from watching the movie. Yeah. So this version of Cinderella, Cinderella's dad is married to Stephanie Lodge, and he is framed for stealing the king's jewels, and a couple of mercenaries, one of was played by Ricardo Freitas. They execute the dad, chop his head off, which was it's kind of that opening scene that tells you you're not in a Disney Cinderella, right? When when the decapitation
Yeah.
happens, and then poor Cinderella is told that, like, oh, that the king actually wants to take her as well, but if she agrees to live with her stepmother and her two stepsisters, and do what they say, she'll protect her or whatever. And so that kind of gives you the sense of why she puts up with this abuse. And for 3 years, that's what happens. We kind of come in 3 years later. We've got the prince's ball. We've got, Cinderella wishing she could go to the ball, and that's when she kind of prays to her fairy godmother. Or she doesn't pray to her fairy godmother; she prays to God in general. But then the fairy godmother shows up in Natasha Henstridge. She, kind of does the makeover. She goes to see Cinderella. She goes to the ball, meets the prince, and then what happens is that there's sort of that whole piece that happens where she is kept from seeing the prince when the prince is coming around with the glass slipper, trying to see who should be sized. And she's kind of tired of the poor treatment she's getting from her stepmother and stepsisters. And Natasha Henstridge's like, well, hey, if you want revenge on them, you just kind of feed into that darker side. And she takes one of the masks that the mercenaries were using when they executed her father, gives it to her, and like, this mask will give you the power to fight back at your enemies. And that's when it happens, right? That's when she starts to kind of piece by piece, she's taking out the people that did her wrong. And then of course she meets the prince, and lives happily ever after. So it's a very fun telling. I mean, I think it's the one thing that for me is that I had fun with the movie kind of throughout, which I think really worked well.
Yeah, that's good to hear. I think that was always our intention, really, that we wanted to have those kind of fun horror moments and build up to some some nice deaths, um and be fun as well. So yeah, not too dark and grim, but very kind of lighthearted and fun, and really kind of have nice payoffs. I think it was one of those things where, in terms of writing, you've got three kind of main villains in it, really, with the stepmom and stepsisters. They were really kind of fun to write. I don't know what it is. I think it's like, actors always often say that they love playing villains, and then I think for me as a writer, I always like writing the villains as well. Yeah, and I loved the way they were performed by Stephanie Lodge, Megan Purvis, and Beatrice Fletcher as well.
Yeah, because one thing I like, so like Megan Purvis, who plays one of the stepsisters, she almost had like a Tracy Ullman quality to her performance. That
Yeah,
yeah, I don't know if you caught the same thing.
I did get that vibe. Yeah, yeah, for sure.
And that was really great. And then of course, Beatrice Fletcher is the other stepsister. I mean, it's like they kind of, unlike Stephanie Lodge, who's almost entirely evil, for the two of them, they're both evil, but like, these sort of bumbling caricatures. And they almost took on the quality of, like, whenever you watch like a Disney movie, for example, or something along those lines, where you'd have like the main henchman, and then these sort of two bumbling, the main baddie and the two bumbling henchmen. They kind of had that vibe to them that I thought worked really well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that was definitely an intention to have their characters a little bit like that, almost to almost incorporate a certain kind of, like, because Cinderella is a really popular sort of pantomime character over here as well, and yeah, pantomime shows are always kind of like very broad comedy here. So there was certain elements of that in terms of like the bumbling nature of them as well, and I guess yeah, that does almost kind of feed into the sort of the Disney thing as well, and those kind of family films where there'd always be kind of like a couple of bumbling, you know, bad guys, maybe like the Goonies and things like that. Um, so yeah, I think it was important to kind of make them nasty, but almost have a certain kind of charm to them as well. not be kind of just relentlessly nasty as well. Yeah, so we tried to kind of make them a little bit more rounded and kind of, you know, quite comedic as well, but still without kind of taking away that need that Cinderella has to kind of exact her revenge.
Yeah, because that's a good point. Because if they're relentlessly nasty, right? Because you know, as an audience, it would get fatiguing. And I think it's always the thing for me with
Yeah,
Cinderella is that when I know it's Cinderella, I know she's going to get mistreated for a certain period of the film, and it's like, oh, I don't want to deal with that part, right? Like I don't want to, you know, I know it's coming, and I don't want to see it. And so, like you said, to find ways to make it entertaining within that piece that everybody knows is coming, I think is a really important thing.
yeah, definitely. I mean, it can be really difficult finding, particularly if you're blending kind of horror and comedy. It's always very difficult finding the right kind of formula and the right balance, because it's one of those things you're never going to sort of get the recipe right for everyone. But yeah, you know, you hope that you kind of strike enough of a chord with most people, at least in one factor, whether it's the comedy or the horror, but ideally both.
Yeah, and I think it's, you know, it I think it's kind of important because I think, like, you know, again, when you know, going back to that opening scene, right, when you've got you know, Mike Kelson who plays Arthur, the dad, right? I think that was the dad's character. Right? Is that the one who gets executed? Uh, I think
Yeah,
that's his name, right? Yeah.
yeah,
So, you know, he shows up in this sort of the stable area, and there's Stephanie Lodge, and we don't know exactly what's happening. We kind of start to figure it out as things go on. That, like, okay, this is the stepmother. She's evil, you know, right? She's stolen these jewels, and she's got these mercenaries that are there to sort of, you know, essentially claim the bounty. And you know it's not going to end well for him because, again, that's the story. That's how Cinderella works. But when that decapitation happens, right, and it is just like the, you know, the head's lopped off, the stump of the neck is bleeding all over the place. The one of the mercenaries gathers up the head to put it in a bag to be able to, I guess, like bring it to the king to show, like, yeah, we caught the guy who stole your jewels. Which excuse me, it's an interesting idea, right? Because you never find out where the jewels are because you've already killed the guy who supposedly stole them. So you'd think the king would be mad about that, but no, I guess that's it's, you know, he's more concerned with the vengeance is that, I guess, than finding the jewels.
yeah, yeah. I think that's it really. That we wanted to kind of give a background to. I mean, the king doesn't actually feature in the film, but his son, obviously, the sort of Prince Charming kind of character, does. And we wanted to have this kind of idea that the kingdom is kind of like in a transition from a very kind of hard, you know, domineering ruler to someone who's going to be a bit more um, civilized, I guess. So that was kind of like that was an interesting background that we wanted to kind of have in, that it's almost this period of time which is going to sort of go from a very kind of harsh ruler to someone who's more considered. Um, yeah, so yeah, that was kind of like our background for that.
Yeah, and so then we get to transition to then, you know, here's Cinderella in her, you know, her beautiful dress kind of sitting nearby, and the stepmother delivers the news that, one, your dad's dead because the, you know, the king thought he stole these jewels, but two, the king wants revenge on you as well, and but if you stick around with me, the king won't exact that revenge on you. And so we get the sense of what the transition is going to be, right? We know when we flash forward, we're not going to see her in this beautiful dress, right? It's going to be more drab stuff from there.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, it just sets the tone for a difficult life to come.
Yeah, and even within that, you know, to give us a sense of how evil the stepmother is, right? Is that she's, after telling Cinderella that her father's been killed, then says, yeah, you know, meanwhile, can you get, you know, prepare tea for me and your two stepsisters? So it's like, yeah, no time to grieve here, right? You've got to jump right in here and start working. And then, you know, when we flash forward to that, you know, that kind of that life that she has, right? You know, again, like you said with the stepsisters, you know, you got like situations like the stepsisters, you know, one the Josephine, played by Beatrice Fletcher, she frames Cinderella for you know, for breaking something, right? She breaks a vase and says, oh, it was you know, Cinderella who does it. And we get this sense too that, like, her life has not been, it's not just sort of like Cinderella getting, you know, mistreated by this imperious stepmother, but there's allusions to beatings, other punishments and things like that she's had to endure over these 3 years.
Yeah, definitely. So you're coming to a point where she's kind of been long suffering, and it's just this mixture. I mean, there's them sort of the sisters kind of playing with her just for their own amusement. Things like breaking the vase and blaming it on her, minor things, and then obviously you've got the more kind of the major moments where even if Cinderella just sort of answers back a little bit, they kind of get almost enraged and have to kind of stamp their authority again, and do something more extreme. Yeah, but I think what we did, we just sort of looked to have these kind of microaggressions and kind of build up to the more horrible things as well, just to kind of get that progression to where Cinderella finally snaps.
Yeah, and it does, like you said, it kind of gets it. I mean, we so after after she has been sort of what the I think it was for breaking the vase. The punishment was like she was sort of taken outside by the two stepsisters, and they were like threatening her with a knife, threatening to take her eye out, things like that. And then the stepmother comes in and says, no, she needs both of her eyes to serve us, right? Kind of thing. But it is that sense of like, okay, there's kind of imminent danger for her, and but then we transition, of course, into the prince's invitation to the ball, right? Which is always that again, like those key points that we expect in the movies, and again, or in the Cinderella story, is that's I guess that's one of the things, right? When you're writing like a Cinderella story, you've got those key points that you have to hit on, as you're writing it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we wanted to stay kind of faithful to the main beats of the story. And then, obviously our little variations were in certain specific moments and kind of, I guess in the revenge part itself, was a lot darker than the original stories. But yeah, I mean, all those kind of those classic things like the ball, the glass slipper, things like that we wanted to kind of have all that stuff in.
Yeah, and what I love is so we get to the point where Cinderella has the audacity, right, to ask if she should if she could go to the ball as well, right? And Stephanie Lodge is like, listen, I'm going to be magnanimous here and not beat you for saying that, right? So we get that sense of like how dire things are for her. But then, of course, like you said, with the two stepsisters, we get that kind of comedic turn where they're trying to get themselves into period gowns, and they're not fitting, they're not working, all that kind of thing. So we get the sense of sort of how uncouth the two stepsisters are, and sort of almost how embarrassed the stepmother is of them, but at the same time she sees her daughters as her key to getting into like kind of the bigger stage from she's sort of wanting to keep marrying up, right? And of course getting into royalty would be the biggest thing for her.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I had a sense that with this while writing the stepmother, that she'd kind of got herself into this level of standing by kind of, I mean, she would have been someone that might necessarily have started the same way as Cinderella in like servitude or something like that, but has kind of slowly worked her way up the class system, and sometimes by nefarious means, and obviously taking on Cinderella's kind of her father's kingdom. But it's kind of getting to this point where she's not kind of super wealthy, she's not kind of like a lot of the other lords and ladies around the area, so she's kind of she's getting to a point where she's starting to struggle as well. And she obviously, it would make a lot less struggle if she had one of her daughters marrying a prince.
Yeah, because even if she has this like you said, this sort of this small kingdom, or the small little amount of land that she got from her husband, who's now deceased. Like I think that the neighboring lords would not really respect her as much, but they would be forced to respect her if she was the mother of a princess.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So I mean, she's got this kind of sense of upward ambition constantly, and yeah, not really any kind of moral compass about how she gets there.
Yeah. Now, it's so we get to that sort of like that ball. We get sort of like, again, like kind of what normally happens with Cinderella, right? We get the sort of the two through lines, right, where you've got the mother and stepdaughters, or stepmother and stepdaughters at the ball, and they're just being extremely uncouth, right? They're stuffing their faces with all the different foods, right? They're kind of making a mess of things. But also too, right, the prince has other suitors, right? There are other women that are around.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so they've got that piece as well. And so that's happening there. At the same time, we've got the classic, Cinderella. So she's actually, it looks like she's at the chapel that's on the estate, sort of praying to God, saying, like, listen, can I just have one nice night in my life? I've been going through so much. Which, so you got to really feel for her, right? You really want Cinderella to have this moment. And Natasha Henstridge shows up, and which I thought was really great, kind of the way she sort of shows up and starts sort of explaining who she is.
Yeah, and we wanted to have the fairy godmother in this as someone who kind of transcends time and space. So she's kind of been everywhere. She's kind of done everything. She knows everything. So we wanted to bring a kind of sense of fun in that side of it as well, which obviously you get in some of the references to who helps Cinderella get ready for the ball. Yeah, I think it was just interesting to have kind of like a creative freedom in writing the fairy godmother, because she's quite a sort of well-traveled character who can kind of bring influences from any time really, into the period setting. And yeah, that was a lot of fun to write.
Yeah, because what I loved about it was, like, yeah, like you said, there's a lot of fun in it, because we get the first hint, right? Like you said, that she traveled, that she kind of can traverse, time and space, and can kind of, go all over. We get the first reference to it when she's talking about, like, fashion, and she mentions hammer pants from the '90s, and of course, Lord Stark's character is like, what are hammer pants? I don't know. So so there's that piece. And then, like you said, so then what she does is she brings in, instead of the fairy godmother, like, kind of like waving her wand and suddenly Cinderella looks beautiful, right? And all that kind of transformation that happens. Instead, right, she brings in people from our modern time. She brings in Tom Ford, the designer, from Gucci. He comes in and designs her dress. She brings in Vidal Sassoon, who does her hair. And then Christian Louboutin does her glass slippers. So of course they have the kind of the traditional red on the bottom there. And then her carriage is a big, the orange Tesla SUV that's driven by Elon Musk. So we've got sort of all these sort of figures from the modern period that are taking her to this ball, which I thought was a really fun touch.
Yeah, I thought it was quite random. A few of those names were ideas given to me by the other producers, but yeah, it's kind of like an interesting mix of people there. But I think it was fun. I think we wanted to also set the idea that the fairy godmother she's quite playful, and then as the film progresses, you kind of get a sense that she almost to some extent likes toying with Cinderella as well. She kind of likes nudging her in a certain way, and almost kind of, I guess, like being a bad influence on her, and kind of enjoying setting things into motion. So
Yeah,
we're never quite
exactly.
sure how moralistic her idea of the whole situation is, or whether she's kind of doing certain things for her own amusement.
Right, which I thought was a good turn there for sure. Because what happens is, right, is we get to our classic, everything that we kind of expect with Cinderella kind of plays out the way we would want it to here, right? Where she shows up at the ball, right? Of course, everybody's like, well, where are the horses, right? For your carriage. But of course, right, she's got the vehicle. She is there at the ball. She, of course, the prince, played by Dale Griggs, is completely, enchanted by her, falls in love with her, much to the chagrin of the stepmother and the step sisters, who are angry that she's there. And she kind of tries to leave because she knows it's midnight. And of course, the prince keeps her there just a little bit too long. And so she tries to escape home. And of course, the stepmother and stepsisters have their own plans for her, right? They lock her out, they dump water on her. So it's bad, but then it gets worse, right? Because then the next day, Bennett actually whips her with a horsewhip. And so again, that's that darker take on Cinderella that kind of gets you in the mode of, like, we really want to see revenge on these people.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's one of those things that, Cinderella kind of, she defies her stepmother, knowing that, if it goes wrong, there'll be repercussions. So yeah, she kind of like she knows what's coming, but maybe even she's surprised at how kind of vicious the response is. And yeah, it's just that thing, she snaps, and then it's down to the revenge part.
Yeah, exactly. Well, maybe that's a good place for us to take a break. So what we'll do is we'll take a break here, and then when we come back, we'll kind of get into the revenge aspect of Cinderella's revenge. So yeah, we'll be right back.
It's the early 90s in LA. The war on drugs is raging, and Detective John Bainbridge is the LAPD's secret weapon against crime. Former special forces in Nam, he's a cop on the edge. When he and his partner Geary uncover a potential human trafficking ring, it doesn't take long before John Bainbridge realizes this thing goes all the way to the top, which doesn't scare him. That just means they'll fall that much harder when he takes them down. Part send-up and part love letter to early 90s action films, Bainbridge will take you back to the golden days of Canon, PM Entertainment, and AIP. You can get it in paperback or on Kindle and Kindle Unlimited from Amazon. Follow the link in the podcast description. My newest novel, Don's House in the Mountains, is available now. It follows Don Veazey, who after 20 years has finally made it as a writer, going from an AP English teacher to richer and more famous than he ever could have imagined. In the process, his wife Lois, feeling alienated and resentful of her husband's success, has filed for divorce, forcing Don to move to a house in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. With time alone to reflect, he's able to see how his new wealth and fame has affected his life in ways he never expected. Maybe the biggest of these is his new house, which is bigger and nicer than anything he's ever had in his entire life, but the longer he lives there, the more he gets the sense that it might have magical powers. But that can't be right. A house can't have magical powers, can it? Pick up Don's House in the Mountains today. You can find it at Amazon in paperback and in Kindle.
All right, we are back, and yeah, we're gonna finish up here by kind of looking at the revenge aspect of Cinderella's revenge. So, after she gets beaten, she she's kind of like, in her room, I guess, sort of kind of complaining, or kind of not complaining, but sort of ruining the life that she's had here. And oh, actually, no, I completely forgot. There was another scene I completely forgot before the beating, right? This is probably the one scene that really got me. This was the one that I'd say I was definitely a little squeamish for me. I completely forgot. We have of course, the prince's his I don't know what we call that, his consort, or his one of his men is going around with the glass slipper trying to find out who Cinderella is, and he goes to Cinderella's place where the stepmother and stepsisters are. And two things, right? Because I think the stepmother knows that it's Cinderella's foot, right, that would fit into her shoe. So he has the stepsisters take her out back and tie her up so that she can't interfere with this. But then when he brings, when the person working for the prince brings the shoe in for the two stepsisters, they're trying to fit their feet in there, and of course they can't. And the person working from has to leave the room for a bit, and that's when the stepmother comes up with an idea that definitely for me, this was the one that kind of made me have to turn away from the screen a bit. But she says to Josephine of the two, because the first sister, Megan Purvis, in kind of true kind of Tracy Ullman style, just like can't fit her foot in. She's trying to stuff it in. It was, just wasn't working. So then it's Josephine's turn, and while the person working for the prince is out of the room, the stepmother picks up a knife and says, "Here, cut off your toe, and then you'll be able to fit in there." And that scene was the one that when she's like doing that, it's kind of like, it's a fake foot, but by the same token, it's kind of bloody and realistic enough that I was just like, oh, I can't watch this.
Yeah, I mean, that's a direct reference, and that's in the very original story from Charles Perrault. So yeah, we kind of brought that back, had that in there, and it's just, it's one of those things. I think we kind of had that very early on in the script, that we wanted to have that moment in there.
Yeah, so that shows you how much I know about this story. That I didn't even know that was a part of the original, but it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it just shows you with sort of a lot of these old fairy tales how dark they were to begin with. you know, because yeah, everyone's kind of got that association with Disney or cartoons, or you know, the very kind of distinct family versions of these sort of princess stories. But yeah, the original kind of fairy tales and like a lot of the grim stuff just were very dark.
Yeah, 'cause I remember people were talking about that with the Little Mermaid, because people were up in arms that they had an African American playing Little Mermaid, and people were like, if you knew what the real Little Mermaid was, right? If you wanted, if you were expecting the real Little Mermaid as opposed to the one that the Disney created, right? If we were really playing it by the book, it would be a whole completely different movie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean the other thing, of course, too, is that it plays true to like what being, I think even today, I mean, I guess, Meghan Markle and that situation, it didn't work out as well for her, maybe being a princess, and her and Harry sort of renouncing his royal. I don't know how that works. He's technically, I guess he's actually fully renounced his UK citizenship, but he's like, I'm not a part of the royal lineage or something. I don't know how that worked when he sort of renounced his royalty or whatever.
Yeah, I'm not too sure on that either, but you know, he's kind of seems to have left that life behind. Um, but I think you know, maybe they still expect all the luxuries that go with it.
Right, right, because that's the key, right? Is that I don't think Meghan Markle would be cutting her toes off for this, or Kate Middleton, or anybody like that. But even today, right, where it's not, the royal family doesn't have the sort of like actual like political power that they would have had back then. Like I don't, you can't, uh, uh, Prince Charles can't just order people to be executed just for the hell of it, or those kinds of things like he could have back then. But especially, like you said, with the sort of the class stratification and where, the stepmother was looking to go and all of that, the idea of being royalty would be worth a couple toes. It's, and in that
Yeah.
sense, you kind of understand why they're doing it.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you know, if you had a sort of reality TV show these days where you had to sort of do something like cut off a toe to win, you know, £1 million, that you'd have plenty of contestants, I think.
Right, right, exactly. So which is, it's a scary thing, but it's kind of the reality of, like you said, with money and class and those kinds of things, that being royalty was almost like being God. I mean, I think it's what the kings called themselves. They call themselves like lieutenants of God on earth. I think it's what their sort of their divine right to be kings. And so yeah, you've got that kind of power. And of course, for someone like the stepmother, that she would want that. So she hatches this plan, which of course doesn't think about the fact that cutting off a toe can be very bloody. And so when the prince's worker shows up and sees blood all over the shoe, because the stepdaughter cuts the toe off and then tries to fit her foot into this thing, and yeah, it doesn't end well, and he's like so aghast that he just leaves and gets out of there.
Yeah, and again, it kind of plays into the idea of those characters being a little bit kind of bumbling, that
Yeah.
nothing quite ever comes off for them.
Yeah, and then of course, in her anger, right, the stepmother finds Cinderella tied up in the other room and just sort of like, gives it to her. I think she slaps her and then sort of talks about what's coming for her. So actually, no, that's right. The whipping, I think, would have happened before them, because I think the stepdaughter had all of her toes when she met with Bennett, and they were like, actually, right, it was Megan Purvis's character was hooking up with Bennett when Josephine shows up and says, who's the one who loses the toes. She says, we've got to dole out Cinderella's punishment. And so they had all of their toes intact for that. So actually, yeah, I think it was more for Cinderella. It was more the fact that she knows she's the one who fits the glass slipper, and her stepsisters did that to her, kept her tied up in the other room so she couldn't tell them that. That really kind of is the boiling point for her. And when she's in her bedroom, kind of ruining this fact that like she's, it all, and actually she does beg for the fairy godmother to come, I think, and says, can you help me? And that's when Henstridge shows up.
Yeah, she goes back to ask the fairy godmother for help again, and that's obviously when Natasha Henstridge kind of ups the stakes a little bit.
Yeah, and I think you're right to that point where she starts nudging her, right? So she tells Cinderella how her father died, right? She explains the actual circumstances of it. She has one of the masks because one of the things we see in the early scene is when the father has been executed, we see a hand grab the mask. And my thought was it was going to be Cinderella that was grabbing that mask and that she was going to harbor this resentment and eventually don the mask and kill everybody on her own. But actually, it's the fairy godmother who has the mask and gives it to Cinderella and says, if you wear this mask, it'll give you the power to exact revenge on your enemies. And then they look out the window, and there's Bennett kind of ambling down the hill, drinking, and it's like, there you go. There's your first one. And we get, I think we get a very good and satisfying kill of Bennett there. It is a bit of a struggle, but and I guess the idea, right, is that Cinderella, she is a little bit stronger with the mask on, right? So she can, deal with Bennett a little bit better.
Yeah, it kind of gives her this little a boost, I guess, but also it gives her that sense of being able to, it's like distancing herself from what she's doing by having the mask on. I mean, I guess you could say that that's almost like why Batman wears a mask as well. Besides the kind of like the anonymity, it's almost like he's becoming someone else as well. Yeah, and that was always kind of like one thing that we wanted in the film. We needed some kind of like motif in it, really, some horror kind of aspect. So that's where the mask came in.
Yeah, and it looks like, I mean, the style of mask looks like the kind of one that you would see in kind of a modern horror where like you had either like a slasher film or one of those like, The Strangers or Straw Dog kind of remake things where, people are in a cabin and they're suddenly besieged by these baddies that they don't know why they're there, but they're, horrible, deranged killers that are wearing these scary masks. It had that kind of a feel of a mask, but yet also felt very like much of the time period as well that the Cinderella would have been set in.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that was always one thing. That's one thing when I'm writing which I'm always interested is how it's going to kind of end up looking. So in terms of the locations and the props, the masks and things like that. So yeah, I was happy with how kind of everything on the design front turned out.
Yeah, it definitely worked there. And I think, we get this first kill and then the next one up is Megan Purvis, and we kind of get some kind of comedic scenes, like you said, with them earlier on, right? So like there's a scene where Josephine's kind of sitting with her foot up, like, oh, woe is me, which she has the right to be woe is me, right? She's just lost her toe or however, and there's a scene, where Rachel makes her a cake and then the cake falls on the floor and they're kind of eating it off the floor and the stepmother shows up and they kind of have to hide that they're doing that. And at the same time, we're seeing sort of like you said, a very classic horror motif there where Cinderella's kind of floating around outside, appearing in the window with the mask on and then disappearing. And so we have that sense of like, okay, something's going on here. And then, Rachel goes outside and confronts her, but she realizes that Cinderella, she thinks it's not a big deal. And Cinderella, of course, kills her, kind of gouges her eyes out, and then I think stabs her. And what's great is that next scene where they're in bed there the Josephine's looking for Rachel that next day and sees two eyeballs just sort of sitting on the bed. That was like, for me, that was like classic kind of 90s horror that you'd see in that kind of movie.
Yeah, for sure. I think again we wanted to, every now and again we wanted to kiss sort of, even at that point in the film where we're sort of shifting into revenge mode, we still wanted to keep a kind of sort of dark humor to it as well.
Yeah, and so what's interesting, right, is that there's sort of this different interplay going on where Josephine wants them to call in the authorities, and Catherine, the stepmother has this idea that, like, one, if we call in the authorities, there's going to be, everybody's going to know that there's women living here that are, vulnerable and could be waylaid, right? It's going to just kind of send out a call, a siren song to everybody, any guys that would come to kind of do them harm. But really, the real idea is not so much that she's afraid to call the cops because of that. It's because she knows she's got kind of she's done some bad stuff in her time. And in her mind, the better play is to go get Ricardo Freitas, who plays mercenary Hogan Savage, and she goes to get him to kind of come and sort of take care of this situation for her. And she finds him having sex with another woman, but then we get the sense in kind of their interplay that the two of them have been at least had sex before, but may have had a relationship before.
Yeah, I wanted to sort of play into that sense that, yeah, like I said before, that she's kind of come from, the sort of lower classes, or the kind of the village streets, and then ended up in a manor house somewhere, or a nice country house. So yeah, he kind of represents a sort of dirty side of her past, I guess, the one she wants to kind of leave behind. But he becomes like a necessary evil to get her way.
Right, because then, right, Josephine is there by herself, which, Catherine, the stepmother's like, oh, it's not going to be so bad. Just lock the doors, not knowing, right, that locking the doors is the wrong thing because Cinderella is the one who's the killer. So it's like you're just sort of, locking her in with the killer. And so,
Yeah.
so Cinderella, kind of does it. But what I think is interesting is we have the wine corkscrew. Because Josephine has a predilection for drinking, right? We've kind of had that joke, and now with no one there to check her, because her sister was keeping her from drinking too much wine, and the mom from having too many chocolate truffles. So with nobody there, right, she's just indulging in all the truffles and wine that she wants. But in that kind of confrontation that Cinderella has with Josephine, she uses the corkscrew to stab her, but then it doesn't end well for her, right? Eventually, Cinderella takes her out.
Yeah. So we wanted that little bit of complication in there, but it's one of those things you kind of know what's gonna happen, what the outcome's gonna be, but we wanted to throw in a few surprises there as well, and a few memorably sort of grim moments as well.
Yeah, and one thing I liked about both deaths, I don't know if you like things about deaths, but one thing I liked about both of the killings is that in both cases, right, if you were going to feel sympathy for either of them, for Josephine or Rachel, there's a moment where they could have possibly even played on sympathy and maybe, convinced Cinderella to go easy on them. But in both cases, they actually become more sadistic towards her. And it's almost like you want to see these murders, which I thought was a good touch in both cases.
Yeah, I mean that was one thing we did refine a few times, that we wanted to make sure that we got a sense that Cinderella, even though she's got this power and she's got the mask and she's kind of exacting her revenge, we wanted a sense that she could still be in danger, and that these two sisters would still be quite dangerous to her and a threat to her life. So we didn't want to lose sympathy for Cinderella, and we didn't want to give too much to the sisters, so we wanted to retain that fact that they would be quite dangerous and deadly if given the chance.
Yeah, which I thought comes through really well. Now what happens is that the stepmother comes back with Hogan Savage, and they find Josephine on the table. She's like hogtied with an apple in her mouth, kind of sort of representing like a stuffed pig or or chicken or something like that. And I had to know, was that actually her in that scene? Like, was that Beatrice Fletcher, the actress, that she has to kind of be in that position to shoot that scene?
I think it was actually, yeah. Well, I don't think they would have had the budget to do a full prosthetic anyway. So, yeah, it must have been her.
Yeah, so hopefully they were able to get the takes in very quickly, because it didn't look comfortable. So, yeah.
I hope so. Yeah.
Because the imagery is fantastic, right? I mean, it is like absolutely perfect, right? Is that she, again, had a predilection for eating and drinking and all of that kind of thing. So for her to be sort of like the roast, right, on the table, and for the mom to find her that way, right, for the that it all worked perfectly. So so Beatrice Fletcher, who played Josephine, I think for the lack of the how uncomfortable it probably was for you to shoot that scene, like it came off really well. So you definitely you suffered for the art, but it worked. So
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Excuse me, sorry. Now one of the things, of course, too, is that one of the great pieces on the set that we had was this like this maze outside, with kind of the shrubs all around there. Was that something where sort of from a location scout standpoint that they found that maze and incorporated into the movie, or was that something where that was already written in and you had to kind of find a place that had that?
I don't think I'd originally written. I mean, I'd always had something like that in mind, obviously with a reference to things like The Shining. But when you write these things, you're never quite sure what locations are around that are going to incorporate everything. I kind of wanted at least a garden or sort of ornamental garden that had sort of high hedges and sort of long kind of fences and things like that, so that people can be sort of parallel to each other and or hidden from each other. But yeah, I think the maze itself came from scouting a bit later, but it was just quite easy to incorporate with how I'd written it anyway. But yeah, I really liked that touch as well, that they were able to find that.
Yeah, it worked. It worked really well for those scenes, especially for Rachel's scene. But even after, when they were kind of going through there and trying to find her and all of that, yeah, it was a really great touch there. Now, yeah, one of the things we're getting kind of throughout these murders, right, is that Cinderella, she's got the mask off and she sees the mask over there and she's like, do I want to keep killing these people? Do I not want to? So she's sort of like, kind of throughout it, right? She's sort of in this mode of like, I shouldn't be doing this. This is bad. And like you were saying, that the fairy godmother would show up and say, yeah, but these people have done you wrong. Like, if anybody deserves to be killed, it's these people. And you do kind of wonder, like, how much of it is, like you said, like, Natasha Henstridge pushing her, and how much it is like Cinderella has this inside her that's been there the whole time. And, Henstridge is sort of like pulling it out, this sort of like latent anger or need for revenge.
Yeah, very much so. I think it's one of those things where, that initial reluctance and that fear, it's almost like a fear as well of kind of, letting herself go like that and lose control. But I think it's another thing there that the more she does it, she kind of becomes attracted to what she's doing as well. This kind of like dark side within her is growing a little bit. Yeah, so initially, the fairy godmother is kind of prodding her and kind of directing her where to go. But I think the closer you kind of get to the end, the more Cinderella is kind of going off her own volition, really.
Yeah, which definitely works there. Now, yeah, and I guess the other thing too I forgot to mention is that Hogan Savage is starting to put together who the killer is, right? Because he's well, actually, it's interesting because he's putting together the details, but he's not. He hasn't gone quite far enough to say that it's Cinderella who's doing this, right? Where he's like, okay, there's no carriage tracks coming in and out, so it can't be somebody who's come off the grounds, right? It's somebody here on the grounds. They initially think it's Bennett, and they find Bennett's body, and I think it's actually right when Savage takes Catherine to Bennett's body just to make sure that it is Bennett who's the murderer. That's when Cinderella kills Josephine. It's like right during that period there. So that when they come back from finding that Bennett was dead, they see Josephine's body, and then it's like it kind of clicks for Catherine that, oh, this is Cinderella doing this, and they're kind of both, Savage and Catherine. Catherine pulls a shotgun off the wall, and Hogan Savage has his own gun, and they're like, okay, let's, we're gonna go after Cinderella. And that's where we get some really kind of fun elements as well. Again, this is kind of our big denouement, right? We know what's happening here. We know what's going to happen. But some of the twists in this I thought were really cool. One is when Cinderella gets shot, right? We think, okay, well, she's been shot, so she's been wounded or something like that. But we find out that the fairy godmother got her a Kevlar vest to wear right under, so of course, something from the future that she was able to use as part of her revenge tactics, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, like I said earlier, we wanted to have these little comical moments, then keep just every now and again breaking up the tension a little bit, just to have that moment of levity, and then sort of crank things up again.
Yeah, and again, it's great because it keeps like that idea that, right, that the fairy godmother is omnipotent and can pull things from any time or any place, and uses that to help Cinderella in her tasks. But and of course, again, we get these moments where it's kind of like Cinderella is almost beaten by her adversaries. And for example, with Hogan Savage there, right, where he thinks he's wounded her, and now he's going to essentially to rape her at this point. And as he does it, that's when he discovers the Kevlar vest, right? Because he pulls off her shirt and sees it, and then sure, of course, she kills him, right there, which was a great kind of touch there. But again, it's that moment where you're like, you're thinking that Hogan Savage, he's not a good character, he's not a nice guy, but as he's kind of walking the grounds and being kind of almost like a Sherlock Holmes types, where he's deducing all the picking out all the crime stuff like that. Again, I started to kind of almost feel not a sympathy for him, but thinking like, okay, this is a someone who's doing something nice here in the sense that he's trying to find who the killer is and all of that. And if there's any sort of like misconception about how bad he is, we get that moment there that's like, okay, yes, take him out, Cinderella. So I thought those kind of touches were always really good there.
Yeah, I think that was definitely something we always had in mind, that we wanted to sort of make the characters a bit more rounded and not just really kind of relentlessly evil all the time. But we still need that moment that toward the end of their time in the film, I guess, where you just have to be reminded that they probably do deserve to be taken out by Cinderella.
Yeah, and that gets us to the final one, right? The final sort of battle between Stephanie Lodge and Catherine, and or sorry, not Stephanie, Cinderella and Catherine, and I think it's kind of what you'd want in that kind of scene. But of course, Cinderella confronts her with the information that, like, I know you had my father killed, because actually it's Hogan Savage that tells him that he was one of the ones who killed, because he recognizes the mask. And so he tells Cinderella, like, oh yeah, I'm the one of the ones who killed your father. Your stepmother had me, put me up to it and all of that. So Cinderella is telling Catherine that she knows all of this, and I think Catherine's feeling is, well, it doesn't really matter now. You're going to die, right? Because Catherine thinks she's got her, but then ultimately Cinderella dispatches her and kind of finishes that off. And then we kind of have the sense of like, okay, what's going to happen from here? And Cinderella wakes up in her bed, right? And she's in better clothes now. So we already have that sense of the transformations happened here. And she goes downstairs trying to figure out what's happened. And there's almost a sense of like, oh, could it have all been a dream, right? That maybe none of this stuff happened and it was all a dream. And then we see that the dead bodies are laid out there. And the detective is Natasha Henstridge as the fairy godmother.
Yeah, we wanted a little sort of a little moment at the end, just a little wink moment where she's almost questioning what happened, but then obviously as soon as she sees the fairy godmother has kind of appeared posing as someone else, that she kind of knows, and she has that realization now that she's kind of like away and clear as well, that she'll get away with it.
Yeah, and then I think what I really liked at the end is, of course, she marries the prince, right? That it's Cinderella's foot fits into the glass slipper, so she marries. But one of the things too, I kind of didn't even think about was like, the idea of the glass slipper, right, only fitting Cinderella. The touch of having it be Christian Louboutin making the slipper specifically for her actually kind of makes it a little bit more believable, because I mean, if everybody's shoe only fit right that one person, the shoe stores would always be like tailoring shoes, but in fact, right, you can they're all just in America. It's like just like I don't know what it's like 9, 10, whatever but people have the same shoe sizes, and so having the Christian Louboutin part, actually I like that he made it specifically for her foot, so only her foot would fit in. That's sort of an element that I always kind of miss in the other Cinderellas.
Yeah, I think that just it's always been one of those things. It's just that classic fairy tale plot hole that's in most of those old kind of fairy stories. And so I suppose that does give us a little bit more legitimacy, I guess.
Yeah, because it's almost like, all right, I mean, I guess the magic glass slipper, I guess, could have only been designed for her foot too. I guess that's possible. But yeah, the way that worked out, I thought was really good. And then, we get, there's always that sense, right, that in the original Cinderella, right, she marries the prince, and it's just sort of this like, princess who lives happily ever after. And in this case, right, there's that sense of like, you know, she's getting her wish to be the princess, and eventually be the queen. But at the same time, there's that sense that she can't go back from who she was when she was committing those murders. And there's like kind of the lovemaking scene where she becomes more dominant, right? And she slaps the prince multiple times. And you get the sense either whether he likes it or not, right? He's just going with it because he feels like he doesn't have any choice. And there's almost that sense that like now Cinderella's going to be this, we don't know if she's going to be imperious the way her stepmother was, but she's going to at least bring that with her. And she kind of breaks the fourth wall at the end and gives us a look when the ceremony is happening.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we didn't want to go just a simple sort of happily ever after. We wanted to just give that idea that maybe she's getting a taste for what she's just done. So yeah, potentially, we might one day see the continuing misadventures of Cinderella.
Yeah, because what's great about these stories, right, is that there's always with especially with Marvel now, right, there's all these ideas of connected universes, right, and stories that take place in a connected universe. But yeah, I mean, having a kind of a warrior Cinderella, and if you do another one like say a Snow White or something like that, that's like another revenge kind of one. But you've got these sort of like these two or three like warrior princesses, kind of going on Xena there, but you could have quite a crossover movie with them, right, where they're all kind of defeated. But even with Cinderella, you could do like you said, like a sequel where like she's it could be almost like a Braveheart kind of thing or something like that, right? Where it's like really like there's an invading Vikings or something like that she's slaughtering or something. So you said like there's a lot of ways you could go with this in the future.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. Because I think you wouldn't necessarily have to be limited to the original stories or the kind of the established stories after that point. So you could kind of almost invent your own tale, really, and incorporate those characters.
Yeah, it's actually thinking of Daniel Zirilli, who we were talking about earlier in the film. He seemed to do that in a lot of his movies. Like there's always like this sort of buttoner at the end that showed like, oh, well, in his case actually there would be a little bit more overt that these ideas of sequels, for whatever his project was, he always left the door open for a sequel. Whereas this one, it's kind of maybe a little bit more understated there, but still there's that idea that like, yeah, you could still do stuff with this character. And Natasha Henstridge says that what's great, I guess, with Natasha Henstridge as the fairy godmother is that if she wasn't available for a sequel, but you still wanted to have the character because she, has the ability to kind of conquer time and space, you could have somebody else play the role if you had to.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, for me, as we kind of as we come to the end here, I mean, I had a lot of fun with this movie, and I think that's kind of the ultimate idea. I think is when with a movie like this is that as long as you're having fun with it, I think that definitely was the thing for me.
Yeah, I mean that's what we set out to do. I mean, we're not, it's not going to be an Oscar-winning film or anything like that, but we wanted it to be kind of fun escapism, kind of classic weekend movie, just to grab popcorn and have have a good time.
Yeah, which definitely came through. A couple of interesting things that happened. One is the opening song for the movie. The opening song kind of makes it sound like Cinderella is going to go out and kill everybody, right? That she doesn't just kill her stepmother and stepsister, but she kills the prince and everybody else as well, which doesn't happen here. That would have been an interesting. I don't think it would have been necessarily a better movie. It would have been a different movie from this one. But I think. Either way, I like the way this movie played out. But yeah, for people watching it, that opening song kind of gives you a sense that she's going to slaughter the whole town, which is a little different. Was that a song that was made for the movie, or is that something that they picked out after?
No, that song had actually been around for, I think, a year or so before the film. I'm not really into pop music that much, but yeah, it was quite a popular song, quite a lot of plays. So I think quite a few people will recognize the song, but yeah, it was kind of established before we made the film. So yeah, I don't know how much that would have cost to buy the rights for, but yeah, it was an already established song. But I think it fits quite well with I guess the tone of the film as well.
That makes sense. That makes sense because yeah, same here. for whatever songs that would. So my understanding of pop music is essentially anything that would be played on like in a store or in an airport or something like that, like while I'm waiting for something. And so yeah, Cinderella killing everybody probably is not something that like you're waiting for your prescription in the drugstore or the pharmacy or something. Probably wouldn't be playing overhead there.
Yeah. I have a feeling it was one of those, because you get a lot of songs nowadays because of YouTube and Spotify and everything like that. I think it was more like a streaming hit song rather than your kind of conventional pop release. But I guess everything is streaming now anyway with music, pretty much.
Yeah, no, that's a good point too. So yeah, so because it's funny because I will like if I visit my family, my mom, she used to do satellite radio, just would listen to like her music from the 70s. But then I don't know why she played like the pop channel when I was visiting the last time. And so yeah, I was hearing like all of these songs. I mean, granted, the pop channel still play a lot of stuff from kind of like the late 2000s, stuff like that. But yeah, I guess there is still like a pop radio out there. I know in America it's kind of more about like sports talk radio. That's kind of the bigger thing because like you said, like everybody kind of streams things on their own and they don't really want to bother listening to like a radio playing top 40 hits when they can just listen to they play whatever they want on Spotify and stream it through their car stereo.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's probably how the song kind of took off originally.
Yeah, that probably that makes sense there for sure. And the other thing is, and I've never seen this happen in a movie before. One of the things I noticed about the movie was that there's certain points where the lighting changed, and I wonder if that's part of it, like the movie, being meant maybe more for streaming originally, and then having this sort of limited theatrical release. Like you'd see a scene that would be that like the color was changed just slightly, like from how the lighting was in that scene. I noticed like maybe like 2 or 3 times that it happened. It's something I hadn't seen in a movie before.
Yeah, I wouldn't know really. That wouldn't have been something I had specified, but I think it's just that fantasy thing as well, where you kind of layer in a little bit of fantasy to the lighting as well. It doesn't, when you're kind of in that space, you don't necessarily have to have a logic to it. Like I know there's a lot of color that kind of gets put in, particularly when sort of Natasha Henstridge is on screen as well.
Yeah, which I thought was really good. I thought that kind of that purplish color. The thing I liked about that purplish color is that you think with Cinderella, you think kind of more like pinks, and the purplish was still kind of like feminine, wondrous, kind of princessy kind of feel, but also darker, and kind of fit a little bit kind of the tone of the movie where it was still like this nice thing, but also not nice, which I thought was an interesting touch there. That like you said, they were adding color to the movie to kind of have that princess element, but at the same time, it was never like these sort of bright like pastels or anything like that.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's probably definitely elements in there of kind of 80s horror and kind of like Italian horrors as well, because I know the director's a big fan of that kind of thing. So that's why you get a lot of quite bold colors in there as well. Referencing, I guess, people like Dario Argento.
Yeah, I mean, coming from that Italian horror standpoint, I mean, the blood really pops, and I think of like the Giallo films or stuff like that, where it's like you just see blood on the wall or something like that, and that's one element of this movie where it's like it's not like a dark corn syrup, it's more of a brighter red. I'm not quite to the light red that you'd see in those old Italian films, but it definitely stood out.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was, I liked the cinematography in it because it's just very sort of colorful, and then obviously you've got all the elements that you throw into it as well with the blood, and everything kind of pops on screen.
Yeah, I think it all kind of came together and worked, and I think again, as I said, it was a really fun movie. Yeah, I mean, I guess as we're wrapping up here, Tom, anything else about the movie that I didn't mention that you wanted to mention?
No, I think that's it really.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm glad you enjoyed it, had a good time watching.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Of course, my my site is called Direct to Video Connoisseur. The podcast is Direct to Video Connoisseur. So being in the theater was it probably goes against that idea, but it was a lot of fun to be in the theater and see this. And this is it's a shame because I mean, granted, there is a lot about this movie that is like a thinking about like you mentioned 80s horror. It feels like a or 80s or 90s feels like a VHS kind of rental that you'd watch and have fun with your friends on a Saturday night. So it had that vibe to it, but it was fun to be able to see it in the theater. And I think anybody listening, definitely check to see, because it is the fact that it was a Regal cinema and not just a small indie theater means that there's a chance that it's available, depending on when you're listening to this, in your local theater. If you get a chance to see it in your theater, you definitely should.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, well, Thomas, we're wrapping up here. Anything that you'd like to plug?
Yeah, so we've got The Baby in the Basket, which is one that I've produced as well. That is just finishing up kind of post-production now, so we're hoping to get that finished in the next week or two. And then it's going to be off to the Cannes film market, and then hopefully we'll get some interest there. But yeah, we're just sort of starting that long process now of kind of attaching a distributor and getting into some festivals, and then hopefully we'll get an early release next year.
Excellent. So that's when we can kind of expect to see that is sometime in early 2025.
Yeah, I would hope so. I think that would be the most optimistic. So yeah, maybe more likely sort of middle of the year.
Excellent. And so how does that work with Cannes? Like you go with the film and you're sort of trying to find distributors while you're there that will pick it up while at the festival?
Yeah, so we've just signed on with a sales agent, so they'll kind of do the legwork for us and use their long list of contacts and sort of get some interest in the film. I mean, we've had quite a lot of interest already, so we're quite optimistic. And yeah, we've kind of just done our announcement, and we've had quite a lot of press coverage, which has been really pleasing from some big sites like Joe Blow and Collider. Hey You Guys, and a lot of those kind of sites have kind of picked it up. We've even been sort of picked up by news articles in Russia and Indonesia and Japan. That kind of bodes well for international sales anyway. So yeah, we'll see what happens. But yeah, we'll hopefully get a bit of interest for Cannes. And then we've got the AFM market is later in the year.
Excellent. That's really exciting. Yeah, I guess when you have like a name what was it? I'm trying to think who you had. It was Mariam Dabo. I'm trying to think if I'm saying her name right.
Yeah.
From Wonder Years. Here in America, we know her from the Wonder Years. Yeah, when you have a name like that, it's like is that, I guess that makes it easier to sell a picture than if for distributors when they're looking at it.
Yeah, I mean, usually I think potentially now we're kind of seeing a little bit of a change where the concept is, just as important now as the names. I think names are a little bit more, you're still quite essential if you're doing sort of action films. But yeah, I think there's a certain amount of weight goes into like the concepts. So there has been quite a recent spate of sort of religious horrors and non-horrors. We've had the First Omen as well, Immaculate, quite a lot of mainstream ones, and then a lot of sort of, I guess, DTV ones as well. So we're hoping that because it's kind of like in vogue at the moment, will attract a lot of interest.
Yeah, that's a good point. That there is a lot of that sort of like, yeah, like I said, like I mean, obviously, like the big one, right, is Russell Crowe, right, the Pope's Exorcist, and but yeah, you're right that there's sort of that especially like you said with nuns and priests, and sort of those kinds of horror films that they're like you said, they're in vogue right now, and people seem to be going in for them a lot.
Yeah, I mean that was a little bit of a consideration when we kind of went into making it, as well as the fact that it was an idea that myself and Nathan kind of were really into, that kind of religious kind of 70s style horror film. So that was a consideration, but we wanted to do something that we thought would have a market appeal. So I guess we'll see in the next sort of 5-6 months how we do.
Yeah, I would think, I think, and I don't know too, like, I guess, I don't know how it works when you have like other movies, like, When Darkness Falls, kind of to your credit, that like they can, do they kind of look for that and say, okay, well, they've done that movie, so we know this one's probably got a certain quality to it that we can, go for. Is that kind of, I guess, I don't know if that helps having a sort of a CV that you can turn to.
Not always. I mean, occasionally it does. I think we signed on with our sales agent a week or so ago, Fabrication Films, and then about a week or so later, another sales agent got back to us. They were kind of a little bit late to kind of email back about the film, just still asking about its availability. This was actually the same sales agent who dealt with Cinderella's Revenge, and they sort of said, "Oh, we've just done this film with the writer of The Baby in the Basket," but unfortunately, they got back to us a week or two too late. So, yeah, we'd already signed on with someone else. But yeah, we're really delighted with the sales agent we've got, and we're confident that we're gonna get some good results.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds really exciting. I'm excited to see the movie. And like you said, probably for people listening here, probably sometime in 2025, but definitely kind of keep an eye on this space here for updates, because we'll definitely have updates as they come.
Yep, hopefully we'll have a trailer in sort of toward the end of the year as well. Excellent.
Yeah, and I think, does the movie itself? I don't know if the movie itself has an Instagram, but I know Flickering Myth has an Instagram, right? That usually has updates on the movie.
Yeah, so there's going to be a dedicated page on Flickering Myth to the movie, so there'll be a lot of updates there, and then just on the Flickering Myth page or my page, we're always kind of updating, the progress of the film.
Yeah, so people definitely should be following on socials, especially like I was seeing the updates, like you were mentioning, like some of the articles that were writing about Baby in the Basket. I saw that on Instagram. I was kind of just scrolling my feed, and there they were there. So yeah, definitely for people to get updates on the movie, following on social, definitely you'll be able to keep track of the progress. Right. And anything else, Tom, as we're wrapping up, anything else that you wanted to plug or mention?
No, I'm busy as always. So I've hopefully got another couple of things coming up with Mark Lester that I'll be able to kind of announce in due course. But yeah, I'm really excited to be, continuing to work with, a couple of the companies from Cinderella. And yeah, there'll be more kind of established horror to come, I think, and a few other genres as well.
Excellent. Well, I'm excited to see what those are, because again, I had a lot of fun with Cinderella, so that's really great to hear that you've got more stuff coming out with him. All right, excellent.
Yeah, well, I'm excited.
Yeah, for sure. We'll wrap up here then. So thanks again, Tom, for coming on. This was a really great conversation, and again, a really fun movie.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Matt. Always a pleasure.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and I will be back soon. Bye, everyone.
Director